WhiskyJason here. Hi, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany. And today we have this new Riff tasting. Welcome. The whole thing will be in English today. It's being broadcast on my English YouTube channel as well as the German YouTube channel as well as by Facebook. I'd like to welcome two people here. The first one is Nathan from the UK. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi there, I'm Nathan. I am Director of End-to-End Bourbons. We are importers of New Riff into the UK and Germany and a number of other brands too. But let's just talk about New Riff tonight.
And we have someone from Kentucky. Jay, good to see you.
Hello. I am Jay Erisman. I'm the co-founder of New Riff and pleased to be here for, I think, my first tasting, albeit Zoom or whatever this platform is called, to continental Europe. So very glad to be here.
Excellent, excellent. And what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to watch a little video that Jay sent over, and then we'll start with the tasting. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat, either in Facebook or YouTube. If it's in German, I'll translate if necessary, but try to have as much communication as possible in English. All right, let's go for the video.
Hello, welcome to New Riff Distilling. My name's Jay. We've been here in Newport, Kentucky since 2014 making bourbon and rye whiskey. Let's go see how it's made. We're an urban distillery here in Greater Cincinnati. We make bourbon and rye whiskey with 6 fermenters feeding 2 copper stills. This 24-inch diameter copper beer still is a classic piece of Kentucky bourbon making equipment. On the back of our bottle, it says, "A new riff on an old tradition." That's the meaning of our name. We learned the old tradition, which is Kentucky sour mash whiskey making, but we want to do a new riff on it every time. We want to learn the tradition, but play it our way. And that's what we aim to do with every recipe we make. All New Riff whiskeys are bottled in bond. We recognize that to be the world's highest standard for aged brown spirits in the world. How could we not bottle everything we make at the world's highest standard? And so we do. All New Riff whiskeys are bottled without chill filtration. Chill filtration is a cosmetic filtration. We don't do that here because we don't want to diminish or attenuate any of all the good things we love about whiskey. Our bourbon is made with 65% corn, and that comes from a single-family farmer right up the road in Indiana. It is non-GMO corn. We think he's the best corn farmer in the bourbon business. Our rye whiskey is made with 95% rye, 5% malted rye, and that 95% rye comes from Brooks Grain. We think they are the best supplier of rye to the bourbon industry. The first thing we did when we built New Riff Distilling was we went looking for a more unique water supply than the city of Newport. We discovered an aquifer 100 feet below us, gives us 500 gallons a minute of very mineral-rich, very hard, 58-degree water. It allows us to run every day of the year. It provides a tremendous green energy savings to our distillery, and it also provides the basis of our big, broad flavor thanks to this big-tasting water that we have. It's unique to us and very special water, we think. Thanks for joining us today at New Riff Distilling. We hope to see you soon in the future.
All right, welcome back. Okay, that was you. Great video.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a video production team here in the next, just down the road, really. They do a great job with that stuff, so it was fun to make.
Very good. I'm just going to show some comments here from a couple people that are watching, some in German. So here we have Benjamin that says hello, even though he doesn't have a set. About 30 sets went out to this. Many of them were in German online retailers that are probably watching. So if you have any questions, please put them also in the chat. So here, Flurp over here, he's in the English channel. Good to see you there. Here we have Bourbon and Rye Time. New Riff, show us what you can. I like that. Florian says hello. Everyone thinks, at least he thinks, of a little bit of riffraff from AC/DC. Expedition Whiskey is there, says hello. MTV says hello. And there was a question already here. Maybe you can answer that starting off from the bat. Malted rye, is it common to malt the rye?
Sure. Well, you know what? If you don't mind, Flurb, I would love to address that when we go and taste the rye in a few minutes, which includes a little bit of malted rye. And there's a good story behind it all, why that is and how it came to be. But why don't we, I won't forget your question. Let's step into the bourbon for starters.
Okay.
And talk about this luscious stuff. So I have here our flagship bourbon, I would say. This is our bottled and bond New Riff bourbon, Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. We put an age statement on all of our whiskey. This is aged at 4 years. We also put the mash bill on the back. We are very pleased to talk about the mash bill. Unlike some distilleries that keep it a state secret, we love to engage people and engage with consumers over our mash bill. So our bourbon is 65% rye, 65% corn, 30% rye. It is a genuinely high rye bourbon. And we wanted to cultivate at New Riff a little bit of an identity as a rye-centric distillery. We make mostly bourbon, but we make an awful lot of rye, particularly for a Kentucky distillery. In fact, we make so much rye that between our high rye content in the rye, about which more in a moment, I'll talk about that next, and the fact that we make a 30% rye mash bill here, we actually use on an annual basis about 30% more rye grain than we use corn, which I assure you has never happened in Kentucky bourbon distilling history. Nobody in Kentucky uses more rye than corn. That's insane. Anyway, here is our bourbon. Let's check this out. And by the way, drink it any way you wish. I've been saying for 20 years, drink your whiskey any way you want, just buy it from me. That said, I like to drink it with a little splash of water because it is bottled without chill filtration, right? All New Riff whiskeys, in fact, all of our products, our gins as well, are bottled without chill filtration. And so if we add a little bit of water to this, we can see, I hope it comes across on the video, we can see these oils and things swimming around inside there. That is smoothness you can see, things that we didn't filter out. No chill filtration was a founding quality precept here at New Riff, and we always knew that we would be unfiltered. It's a small passion of mine, you could say.
Very, very good. Could you tell us a little bit about bottle and bond that everyone in Europe knows about it, and that's something that's very specific to the United States?
Sure. So about bottled and bond, and shall we taste the whiskey first? And
yeah, let's go for it.
Get it across people's lips.
Cheers.
Cheers to everyone. Thank you. Pardon me. Danke. Danke. Yes? Yeah. Danke.
You're welcome. Well done. Well done.
So at 30% rye, it has considerable spicy flavor. The rye, as we will taste in a minute when we try our rye whiskey, rye grain in a bourbon mash bill adds spiciness like clove. And maybe we want to put these in the chat, the German words for these, but things like clove and cinnamon. Sometimes there is a mintiness. There can be flavors of root, and I don't know if you have these where you all live, but roots like sarsaparilla or sassafras, or some of the roots that are in root beer, those kind of flavors can also come up in the rye. So that's all coming from the 30% rye in this mash bill.
Which we don't really have in Germany. Root beer is not something we have at all over here, so not really, but that's okay.
Good.
But that doesn't matter.
Right. Anyway, there's a panoply of very many different rye spices that come out of being a high rye bourbon. And like I said, that was very intentional on our part. We wanted to be a rye-centric distillery. We wanted to make big, bold whiskey. We didn't want to make mild, gentle whiskey. We wanted coming down the mountain with flavor, right? And one way to do that is with a lot of rye in your distillate. So, to bottled in bond, one of my favorite topics. Here it is, bottled in bond. This, as we write on the back, goes back to the 1897 Bottled in Bond Act, right there. In 1897, Kentucky distillers and the certain people in the government at the time promulgated and passed a legislation that was called the Bottled in Bond Act. And it was, at least in America, if not the world, it was the first Consumer Protection Act or Product Protection Act. And the Bottled in Bond Act listed a host of quality requirements that a whiskey or you can have other things that are bonded like rum or apple brandy or things like that. A bonded spirit has to meet a host of quality parameters, including it has to be at least 4 years old. It has to be 100 proof, not at least 100 proof, only 100 proof, which is probably
which means in German or in Europe it's 50% alcohol.
Right, 50%.
ABV, alcohol by volume.
Right.
We don't think in proof, sorry.
Right, it's okay. Proof is simply twice the alcohol, so 50% ABV. And that's probably my favorite part of the Bottled in Bond Act. When you compare it to the legislation around the rest of the American whiskey industry, or in Scotland or Cognac or any of the other great spirits regions, they all are watered down to 40%. And Bottled in Bond is the only one that requires strong water, right? That insists on good, strong alcohol content. So another requirement is that it is distilled by one distiller in one season. And what that means is, I don't know if you can see it here, but right up here we have
a little bit bigger again here. Wait a second.
The season of distillation. This was distilled in the spring of 2017. It was bottled in the spring of 2001.
Same thing I have, or same thing we have in Europe. That's great.
Right. So it has to be, cannot be blended. You cannot blend bourbon and rye together and call it bonded. Like I said, it has to be 4 years old. You cannot add any flavors to it. And in fact, it has to be unaltered from the barrel, with the exception of two things. You are allowed to add water to bring it to 100 proof. And you are also allowed to chill filter the whiskey. Mm-hmm. And how interesting, by the way, that the federal government, they admit in the regulations that chill filtration would change the whiskey. Okay. And we don't even do that at New Riff. So we believe that this is one of our, as we call it here, a new riff on an old tradition. This is our riff on Bottled in Bond. We take a modern quality standard like no chill filtration and put that together with this ancient is a bit strong, but this old and classic piece of American whiskey tradition, the Bottled in Bond Act. To this day, it is higher than the standards in other countries, higher than the standards in Scotland, for example, and I mentioned Cognac, where you are allowed to add sugar and oak flavoring and caramel color and things like that. You can't do any of that to Bottled in Bond products. So when we decided to do Bottled in Bond, we realized that if this really is the world's highest standard, how could we not bottle everything we make at the world's highest standard? And that's what we do, with the exception of our single barrel products, which we will taste in a few minutes. Our single barrels are barrel proof without chill filtration. Right. And so that cannot be Bottled in Bond because it is not 100 proof. It is still 4 years old, but it's not Bottled in Bond. But when I say everything we make is Bottled in Bond, what I mean is when we come out with a new whiskey, it comes only as Bottled in Bond. We just released in Kentucky last month our 100% Malted Rye Whiskey, and that was a 6-year-old. It's delicious, and it's Bottled in Bond. That's the only way we make whiskey. We do not have small batch. We don't have a 1-year-old for at 40% ABV. Everything is at the world's highest standard.
Excellent. So the Bourbon Diary says, Kai actually says he loves your bottle. It's a little bit modern at the top and a little bit classic at the bottom. You can actually see that it's actually you have up above here a little bit of a, what is that? How did you do this wonderful fading effect? Yeah. I mean, that's fabulous.
Thank you, Bourbon Diaries. That's exactly what we had in mind when we made this bottle. It is, so what they call this an ombre, meaning like a shade or a coating, a shadow. And it's applied at the factory where this is made. Our bottles come to us from France. And what we wanted was a new riff on an old tradition. Implicit in this slogan is new and old, right?
Yeah.
So we wanted some elements of the whiskey bottle that were old, like the embossed bottled in bond, or this tack strip right here, listing the seasons of distillation. It's a whiskey bottle shape, right? But we also wanted some things that were new and sleek and sexy, and so we've got this black ombre also on the bottle. There's a picture of the building on the back right here, but it's not an old time illustration, nor is it an old time building. It's a piece of modern architecture. So we have this line drawing on here. So there are portions of the package that also reflect the wonderful tension and creative synergy that happens between new and old. Yes, that's exactly what we had in mind.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much. Now, you did mention chill filtration. 1897, was there possibility for bourbon to be chill filtered back then? Just from a historical viewpoint, I really don't know.
No, good question. When the federal regulation mentions chill, they actually the wording that they use is chill proofing. I don't believe that was in the original articles. The original legislation insisted that the spirit had to be unchanged out of the bottle, except for adding the water. And the original language might have mentioned something like a filtration step, but I don't believe they had chill filtration in the 19th century.
No.
And that was a much later innovation. And there were, in fact, at some bourbon distilleries, they only began chill filtering maybe 20 years ago. Prior to that, they used activated carbon or diatomaceous earth or things like that to do their filtration. But we do not do any of that at New Riff. It is strictly unchill filtered.
Okay. Looky here, I ordered the last New Riff from England. Will there be a German or Swiss dealer selling your products? Yes. Dine Whiskey has them at the moment. Bio Wine has them at the moment. Whiskey.lu has them in the moment. You can contact me. A couple bottles I have left as well here. We're waiting on the next 2 pallets to be sent from Kentucky to arrive over here in Germany. We're hoping in the middle of September. We'll see how it's with the excise taxes and import and so on. As we know, it's very difficult at the moment to send products across the ocean on just 1 pallet or 2 pallets. If you have a whole container, shipping companies go no problem, but otherwise it's always a little bit of a problem to do that. But we're very, very good hopes that this will be in Germany again very, very soon, and you'll be able to actually also the companies can pre-order whiskey at the moment if they would like also there. All right, very good, Jay. So tell me a little bit more about the bourbon and what's the big difference between that, and we'll move on also to the rye here.
Right.
You talked about the mash bill. When in Europe we usually have single malt, which is 100% malted barley. In America, it's different as well, something not everyone knows.
Right. So in America, we have our whiskey traditions evolved to incorporate multiple grains. When we came here, when I say we, I mean the European immigrants who first began distilling rye. Actually, rye is the oldest American whiskey. It predates bourbon by a couple of decades, probably. Rye was distilled on the East Coast in the northeastern colonies, places like Maryland and New York and Pennsylvania, before Kentucky was even really settled. And it was a grain that grew well in the Northeast, the poor soil and rocky soil that they had, and it was an old world grain as well. However, they had rye. They didn't have quite the supply of barley, let alone barley malt, that they did in Europe. There is historical distillation of rye in the Celtic regions. It is a grain that is allowed in Irish whiskey, although it's not at all common, and has not been used in Irish distilling for many decades in any meaningful amount. There was a small usage of it. And of course, in a place like Germany, you have various schnapps, which of course are made with rye historically. Yep. And if you go to the Eastern Europe, Poland and places like that, you would have very ancient and old styles of vodka that of course would be made with rye. But there wasn't a rye whiskey category or a style really until the Americans invented it. And in order to ferment that, and turn the starches into sugar, they had to add a portion of a malted grain. Sometimes that might have been malted rye, but most of the time it was malted barley. And so from the beginning in American whiskey, we were pushed a little bit by the grains that we had available to making a mash bill of multiple grains, not 100% barley malt as you do in Europe. There were malt whiskeys made in America back in the 19th century, and there were some made in Kentucky, but it was by no means the normal thing. By the time Kentucky was settled, then corn was the predominant grain. It was what grew here very well, and farmers began turning that into whiskey. And in order to help give it some flavor, they took to adding portions of rye. You add a little bit of barley malt to the recipe in order to affect the starch conversion with the enzymes that are in the malted barley or malted grain. But the rye is generally put in there as a flavoring grain. It has this nice spicy flavor, and it is put in the mash bill in order to give it a little flavor. And when we come to rye whiskey, our mash bill is again very unique and a special one. On the back of the label, again, it says the mash bill: 95% rye, 5% malted rye. So back to the question earlier: is it common to malt the rye? No, it's not very common in America. In fact, when we went about making our 100% malted rye whiskey, which we are not tasting today, we don't have it. We don't have it selling anywhere outside of Kentucky yet. We had to get a very good supply of malted rye, and we could not find a domestic American source for that much malted rye. And so we import our malted rye from, wait for it, Germany.
Weimar, yes, in Germany, Bamberg.
That's right. We use rye from Germany, and we import it by the container full. We are probably the the United States' largest producer of malted rye whiskey. I'm not certain about that, but it's not a very common whiskey to make in America, and there's only a few people I know of making it now, and I really don't think they make as much as we do. Anyway,
what is the capacity of your distillery, if I may ask?
Right, we make about 8,000. We think in barrels. We make about 8,000 200-liter barrels per year. Mm-hmm. And we actually are expanding just this very day out there in our distillery. We have some guys working to expand our distillery, and that will take us up by 50% increase to about 12,000 barrels a year. So we are relatively small in the scheme of things. There are Kentucky distilleries or bourbon distilleries not far from here who make 7,000 barrels in a week. Mm-hmm. And here we are making 8,000 a year. However, we are not a tiny micro distillery. We are not a couple of guys in the back room cranking it out on a pot still. We make whiskey on a beer still and a doubler, a column still, very much like they do in the wider Kentucky industry. Excellent. So if we would like to get into tasting the rye.
Yes, please, let's do.
If the bourbon had a spicy flavor from 30% rye, imagine how spicy things get with 95% rye and 5% malted rye. So we call this 100% rye.
Excellent. I love a good rye. And I actually really like this. We have at the moment fall 2016, and it was spring 2021. So this is the oldest one on the table at the moment, which is something I really noticed, that the bottle and bond a little bit older was a little bit older than our single barrel at the moment. So yes, add a little bit of water. I'm going to do it as well. How would you describe typical rye tasting notes? Not everyone has had a good rye.
Right. So many of those spice flavors that I mentioned earlier are very prevalent here as well. Clove, sometimes some cinnamon, black peppers, or other varieties of pepper, sometimes pink peppercorn, sometimes grains of paradise, which is sometimes called African peppercorn. Very exotic spices that can come. I mentioned mint, and the mint is more prominent here. However, it's not like a peppermint candy. It's more like, and I don't know if you can translate this to German, but we have the English words would be things like wintergreen or spearmint.
Exactly.
These
Wrigley
yeah,
spearmint, right?
right. These are minty flavors, but they are a little more herbal, a
Yep.
little more herbaceous than straight peppermint,
Mhm.
than like a peppermint candy.
Exactly. So both of these are bottle and bond, which means they have to be 50%. That was something I did not understand at the very beginning of my German career 5 years ago, my bourbon career. Bottle and bond is 50. It can't be 51. It can't be 49. It's
Right.
always 50%. And so both of these are 50. The single barrels are usually higher, and we'll talk about those in a moment. So here it's a fantastic taste, is what also Exhibition Whiskey says. And I really love it. If I'm going to pick one of my favorite of these four, actually it is the rye bottled and bond. I like this the most.
I see a question here from Expedition Whiskey. Will New Riff make a corn whiskey? Well, the short answer is no. And just so everyone knows what a corn whiskey is, it's a category of American whiskey. It has to be made from at least 80% corn. And it has to be either unaged or it can be aged in used barrels, used cooperage. Whereas the cooperage for a bourbon has to be new charred oak barrels. In corn whiskey, it can only be used and uncharred cooperage. Very odd requirements there. However, Expedition Whiskey, very interesting question. And let me let you in on a small secret. We actually have made corn whiskey. And this is a very nice pivot into another point about New Riff, about sour mash. Perhaps you have heard about sour mash whiskey making. And this is the tradition of whiskey making in Kentucky. It is the one unique thing that Kentucky gave to the world of whiskey making is the sour mash technique. And what sour mash involves is if you saw the video, you saw the tanks, the fermenters full of bubbling beer. And we take that beer and it is put through the beer still. And we take out the alcohol, and then the spent grains, or what we call the stillage, goes out the bottom of the still, and we save a portion of this spent grain, which is a wash. It's very watery and thin. It has all the solids in it, but it's not like the spent grains that you have in a brewery. We take some of this liquid and we save it. We set it aside, and it goes back into the next production, the next mash. Some people compare it to sourdough bread making. It's not quite the same really at all, because in sourdough you have an active culture, and there is yeast and things like that in a sourdough culture. In the case of sour mash whiskey making, the sour mash, it's called backset because it has been set back and set aside in order to go into the next batch. So the backset is not active. It is biologically inert because it's been boiled and steamed. It's been steamed, and so all the yeast is dead. The lactic acid bacteria is dead, and it's had all of the volatile compounds taken out, namely the alcohol. So this is Kentucky's tradition in whiskey making, and it's what New Riff adheres to religiously. We only and ever make sour mash whiskey, which raises the question. When we started distilling in June of 2014, how did we make sour mash whiskey? We had never made whiskey before, right? You cannot buy backset on Amazon. You cannot get it at the grocery store. So how did we make our very first batch of bourbon? And we swore we would never make a batch of bourbon for New Riff that was made not with sour mash, was made with so we had to get backset. So the very first whiskey we actually made was a corn whiskey. And the corn whiskey became
going back now. The question, good,
became a sacrificial victim. We only made the corn whiskey in order to get the stillage, and we could take that stillage and save some and make sour mash bourbon. And so, anytime that we have been shut down, we have had to make a corn whiskey. Happily, we've only ever had to do it twice. We have made two corn whiskeys. They're pretty good corn whiskeys, actually, as it goes. So to Expedition's question, no, we will not make or market a corn whiskey, but we have made some. And if we ever needed to make some whiskey in order to get stillage, again, it would be corn whiskey.
Okay. So Daniel Whittington is a guy that knows a lot by the Whiskey Vault. Apparently someone thought they said bottle and bond can be over 100 proof, but no one does. According to regulations, I would say no. The McKenna 10 is always also then 50% if it's a bottle and bond version. Interesting, right?
Right. No, the legislation is quite clear. It has to be 100 proof.
Yeah.
Not at least 100 proof, but only 100 proof. The point of bottled and bond is, I mean, some of these regulations may look a little silly or archaic. The entire point of it is that when a consumer picks up a bottle of bottled and bond whiskey, they know what they're getting.
Yeah.
They know it's not blended. They know it is of one age. They know it's made by one producer. And to eliminate any question about how strong it is, they have a standard of 100 proof. So it is it's a standardization of quality, which at the time it was created, it was made in response to American whiskey blenders who were doing terrible things to whiskey.
Rectifying, right?
They were rectifiers, is what we call them here. And they were adding all kinds of adulterating substances to whiskey. And the Kentucky distillers were angered by this and said, no, we make the good whiskey. We make what should be called whiskey. And so they got the Bottled and Bond Act passed. And it was a way to get a good, pure bourbon back in a day when very many things were not pure. That's not the case today. However, I think the need for bottled and bond is as powerful as ever, because we have so many producers out there who are not distillers, who are only bottling something, who they do not disclose the state it was distilled in. They don't tell you who made it. It could be blended of all different sorts of things. I don't think they put formaldehyde and copper sulfate and terrible substances in the whiskey anymore. But some of them do add a flavor, actually.
Yeah.
So there is still every reason to go with bottled and bond whiskey.
So I have a guy over here that said I would buy a bottle of your corn whiskey immediately, and another person would also be interested in that. Will that ever go on sale, or is it probably also a gift shop only and Kentucky only thing?
Yeah, we don't know what we'll do with it. I haven't tasted it in a couple of years. There's only we did put it in the barrel, but we only made a half a batch of it because we only needed a little bit of stillage. So we didn't even make a full batch of corn whiskey. So no, I don't know what we will do with it. Maybe we will just drink it ourselves.
Excellent. So the new Riff Kentucky bourbon bottled and bond over here, 50% costs about 58 euros, and the rye costs about 62 euros. Those are retail prices, so they may vary plus minus a little bit, but you notice about where we're at the moment. And that's actually in spite of the 25% tariffs that are still on products, bourbon, rye from the US, that we have to pay to get it over here. Hopefully, Biden and the European Union will work that out soon. And then that will also help us in the future here to have somewhat lower prices for our products here from N10 Bourbon. So Nathan, I did mute you because there was a little bit of an echo. If you ever want to say something, just raise your hand and you can talk, okay? You're unmuted, by the way.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent. All right, good, Jay. Should we move over to the single barrels?
Sure.
So if there are any questions out there of the people who are watching, we have people in Luxembourg, we have people in Paris, we have people in Poland, we have people all over Germany watching here. That's kind of cool that we get to do this. And so I really like the Bottled and Bond products. I think that is a gold standard in the U.S. Bourbon and rye market. I really do appreciate that you're doing that actually at New Riff. But in Germany, one of the things we just love are so-called single barrels. And the best thing would be barrel-proof single barrels. And that's what you're giving us. So thank you. Tell us a little bit.
Right. So by the way, I should say where New Riff comes from somewhat.
Give us a little bit of background history before we do
for
this.
For those of you in the audience who may be a merchant, a store or a retailer, you are near and dear to our heart. Myself and the founder and owner of New Riff, his name is Ken Lewis. We are whiskey retailers. We are a retail shop. I worked for Mr. Lewis from 2001 at a very large retailer right here in Kentucky. In fact, they are right next door to New Riff. They're called the Party Source. I'm sorry I don't know the square meters, But if anyone would like to handle the conversion, the party source is something like 112,000 square feet.
About 12,000 square meters, so about divide by 10.
Okay, a very large store, maybe the
Especially for
largest,
alcohol, yeah.
maybe the largest in the country. At any rate, I helped him run that. I was the fine spirits manager, and we did a great amount of projects and had very intimate relationships with Kentucky's bourbon distilleries because we were the largest store in the state. And we had a hell of a lot of fun doing single barrels. So as we were developing New Riff, we realized we absolutely have got to have a really great single barrel program. We've got to do right by single barrels and really make it a fun thing to do. And so this is New Riff single barrel bourbon. It is barrel proof without chill filtration. And my bottle happens to be 113.3 proof or 56.65 alcohol by volume ABV right there. I don't know what you have exactly.
We have 104.9, which is a little bit lower. That's 52.2. At the moment, the ABV seems to be going down a little bit. Is that because of weather or because of other factors? Could you elaborate maybe on that?
Sure. So New Riff goes in the barrel at 110 proof. You may know that the legal limit for barreling bourbon is 125, which is unique. I don't think in any of the European regulations there is any limit about how strong the whiskey can be going into the barrel.
No, only coming off the still, which is I think 94.6%, right?
So we have to come off the still at no more than 160, and in fact, New Riff comes off the still at about 135 proof. And we go in the barrel at 110 proof or 55% ABV. We choose to go in the barrel at that lower proof because there are flavors we think we can get at 110 proof that we would miss at 125. So we spend more money in cooperage to do that. If we make this much whiskey and we cut it to 125 proof, now I need this many barrels. And if we cut it to 110, now I need this many barrels. It costs us in cooperage to do that. So it goes in the barrel at 110. Sometimes it goes up a little bit as we have here. Sometimes it goes down a little bit. So we range anywhere from about a low of maybe 103 or maybe 108 is more common, up to about 114 proof or 57%. So what you don't find in New Riff are 71% alcohol, 68% alcohol, which those are fun to drink, but they are they're very, the word in English is obstreperous. They're over strong sometimes, And one thing I like, of course, I am still going to add water to my single barrel, but I like that this is approachable for people who do like to drink it straight up. 113 proof. Ooh, this is good. And it's very supple, very, very tractable, we also would say in English. Very approachable. It's controlled, right? And I like that.
It doesn't burn off the nose hairs, and it gives you a little bit of a Kentucky hug, but it doesn't try to strangle you, right?
Right.
Could you mention for a moment a little bit about your warehousing? This was here mentioned. Do you have heating like maybe Woodford Reserve does? Do you have rotation in your warehouses like Maker's Mark? What's your story in your warehousing?
Right. No, we do not have any temperature control in the warehouse. We do store them primarily in a rick house, and that is on our, not at this location, but we have a second location here in northern Kentucky, where we have our barrel warehouses and our bottling facility and things like that. And it's uncontrolled. We do not do any rotation. However, we do hold back about 25 to 33% of everything we make in order to become older. I don't know how much older. That's not really important right now. We just hold it back for the future. And when we do that, we would pull whiskey out of the rick house at 4 years old and bottle some of it and put the rest back, but we put it back in a different location.
Okay.
So in that way, we have a very sort of ersatz barrel rotation. Not in the formal sense that they do at a distillery like Maker's Mark. But.
Okay.
So in our single barrel, go ahead.
There was another question about the barrels. Are they toasted? Are they charred? What's going on there, if you may?
Right. We have, they charred by law. Yes, they are char number 4, and they are all toasted. We do have a few barrels that are char number 1, and those are made with air dried staves that are dried for 24 months. So the typical bourbon barrel, they dry the staves in the air for only about 6 months. And most of our barrels actually are 18-month air dried or 24-month air dried. And we put a number 1 char and a heavy toast on the 24 months. So we do have a little nuance going on in our barreling, in our cooperage.
Can you say, do you go for ISC or are you more Kelvin cooperage? Where are you?
We use ISC. We actually use ISC and Kelvin. Mostly ISC, but we've been with Kelvin from the beginning as well.
Yeah, excellent. And the last question here was, are the single barrels also at least 4 years of age? Of course.
Right there, baby.
Yep, I'm going to put you big here. Make you do that again. So
yes, everything at New Riff is aged at least 4 years.
Exactly. And so that's very, very good.
So these single barrels, and I've got a good one here. Obviously,
they're all good.
They are all good. They are all tasted and vetted by someone on our sensory panel. All these samples here we deal with all the time, and they are they obviously showcase the flavor of one barrel. But there's another reason that I think our barrels are extra special, and it has to do with how we barrel each batch of whiskey. So go back to the video that we played. There was the bubbling vats and the fermenters. So when we distill a fermenter, we distill it, we obtain the spirit, and it goes in a tank. And we cut it to 110 proof, and then it goes in the barrel. We distill another fermenter, and that one goes in a tank, and that gets cut, and that one goes in the barrel. The reason for this is that the tanks that hold the spirit are relatively small. They're only big enough to hold one fermenter worth of spirit. That's because we are a small distillery. And for better or for worse, this is how we operate, meaning that more or less, each fermenter is barreled separately from each other fermenter. It's not a very hard line, because there is some mixing of beers in the beer well, but mostly each barrel, each fermenter is barreled separately. And that means 4 years later, we obtain the difference, not only from a single barrel to a single barrel, but from fermenter to fermenter. And the beautiful thing is that each fermenter has a little different flavor. I don't mean each fermenter always gives a different flavor. I mean each given fermentation of a given day can have a different style. This one might be sweet. The next one could be dry. The next one might be very spicy. The next one could be a little bit smoky. The next one could be very oaky. So they have different characters. And we know they do because we taste every lot of whiskey. Yeah. Most large distilleries do not run this way. They run in a way where they distill a fermenter and it goes in the tank. And they distill another fermenter and that goes in the tank. They distill 5 more fermenters and they all go in the tank, and the tank is as big as your house, right? And they blend and mix together, homogenize, really is the word. They mix together all the batches so that they have a common flavor. And that's a very smart way to operate, because you build a lot of consistency in to the flavor. Whereas in our case, when we come to make the Bottled and Bond bourbon, and this is made of about 25 different barrels, we have to mix up many different fermenters, many different lots or batches in order to get a consistent and a broad example of New Riff flavor. But the beautiful part is when we come to these single barrels, and we have, again, as I said, the difference of flavor from one fermenter to the other. And so if you buy 3 different single barrels from New Riff, they will probably be quite different, very different. What we have is a very broad range of flavor in our single barrel program. And we did not plan it that way. It just happened because we are small. Right. But the result was really a lot of fun in our single barrel program.
Do you have open fermenters or closed?
Open fermenters, yes.
So that means actually wild yeast might actually be able to enter and so on, and also the wood, and that's very, very interesting because seasons change as well, and the yeast in the air does change a little bit with it. So cool.
Right. Yes, they are stainless steel fermenters, actually,
right.
not wooden fermenters. We do allow and encourage a microflora. There might be some wild yeast, but principally the other biological actor is lactic acid bacteria.
Okay.
And that is how the mash becomes sour. When you taste the beer before it gets distilled, it is notably sour. So that stamp, that microbiological thumbprint of is unique to New Riff and unique at every other distillery. And we encourage that. We allow it to happen, certainly.
All right, so the next question was, why don't you have an age statement on the bottle? You have to kind of do the math. All right, so I have here fall 2016. I have spring 2021. Okay, 4+ years. Very, very good. And will there one day be a 10-year-old was the second question when we're talking about age anyways.
Right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are holding back about 30% of our product across all of our different brands to become older. At this point, we don't know how older. Might be 10, could be 12, could be 8. But yes, we will have older products someday.
All right, excellent, excellent. I like that. Now, we've had the single barrel bourbon now. This was fantastic and excellent. And since we wanted to keep it to about an hour, I'm going to actually ask us to go over to the rye, which is very interesting for me. Is at the very beginning, I can't see how much I drink, but as soon as I get halfway down, it's like, oh, I need to either stop or hurry up. But the first couple drams are just like, no, don't see a thing, doesn't change. And then it's just like, okay, yeah, now I need to know what I'm doing. I like that design a lot.
So this is our single barrel rye. Again, all the precepts that apply to the single barrel bourbon apply here as well. Uh-huh. It's barreled at 110 proof, and so in my case, my bottle is 53.2% right there, alcohol by volume.
Yep.
And we again have some that are 110 proof or a little bit stronger.
We have 52.8 here at the moment in Germany. Yep. So
By
the
way,
mash bill is the same for for both of the ryes and both of the bourbons, right? The only difference is single barrel and basically small batch, about 25 barrels added together at 50% here, straight from the barrel.
Right. By the way, someone was asking why does that happen, and I don't think I quite answered that. It happens. The proof drops or goes up if the barrels were stored on the lower level of a warehouse. They tend to lose a little bit of alcohol, and if they are in the middle of the warehouse or higher up, they tend to stay the same or gain a little bit. So that is why. It just happens that. When we put barrels away, we put away a day's production here in this part of the warehouse, and then tomorrow we go to this part of the warehouse, and then the next time we go to this part over here of the warehouse. So at a given moment, we may be pulling from any region in the warehouse. And when you have a barrel, for example, mine is 53% instead of 55 or 57%, it's because it was stored at a lower level in the warehouse.
Very, very good. So, excellent. So, could you show your barrel? Show a bottle once again. Someone was asking about what was marked out. So, was anything marked out? No. So everything's there, exactly the same thing I have as well. I don't know. Someone was asking about that. There's something was blacked out. So, all right, don't worry.
Perhaps they were seeing the state of Kentucky.
Actually, okay, yeah, exactly. By the way, this is the state of Kentucky. Exactly. For those of us that are not U.S. citizens, this is not a blacked out. This is actually the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, don't feel bad. I can't draw Bavaria either. Okay.
Exactly. That's actually what they're talking about. I had no idea what that was going on there. Okay.
I couldn't tell you Saxony to save my life.
No, don't worry. And some Germans couldn't draw it either, by the way. So don't worry about Saxony. Good place to be, but not a draw the state of Saxony. Ooh, even my wife would have problems with that, and she's German.
So once again, we see all the flavors that we found in the bonded rye are made more singular here.
No.
And we can get really some quite exotic flavors out of the rye. Sometimes some fruitiness. Some floral notes sometimes can come along.
Yep, got it here.
Yep. And the mintiness can really start to happen as well. In fact, something that I like to do with our rye, it's probably heretical in Kentucky to say this, but I enjoy making a rye mint julep.
Yeah.
Do you ever drink a mint julep?
I don't, but I've had. I need to do that one day. Yeah, I can imagine that.
Made with bourbon, but I think it's really fun to put it in our rye because as you put that sprig of mint in and you're smelling the mint, you have this whiskey that has tones of mint as well. Makes for a very nice drink, I think. But then I'm a native of Ohio, so what do I know?
What do we know, right? Excellent, excellent. So here we've never had a rye mint julep. That's something they want to have now. Excellent. You're creating new markets. And another thing was, will it ever make it out of France? Do you have any connections to France or not yet?
We're working on that.
de Whiskey is something that always loves to import big container-fulls of stuff.
Right. We have spoken to La Maison de Whiskey, and someday we hope to get there. You know, this goes for our work with Nathan in the UK as well. We probably could sell every drop domestically. Yep. We do not need to go to Europe to sell New Riff and make our money. But it highlights what is the true goal of New Riff. It is not to sell as much bourbon as we can, because if it was, we would have made a larger distillery. It's not to certainly not to sell the company. Heaven forfend. We are proudly independent and insisting to stay that way. We are owned by one man, Ken Lewis, and no investors, no stakeholders, no shareholders, nothing. No bean counters telling us what to do. We are free to make the best whiskey we possibly can. But our ultimate goal is, and it sounds a little almost naive maybe, but our goal is, and we tell ourselves about this all the time, we remind each other about it. Our goal is to be one of the world's great small distilleries. Yep. And to be on the list of the world's great small distilleries. And we think to get on a list like that, you need to be sold in places like the Whiskey Exchange and some of the other shops that Nathan has got us into in the UK, and La Maison de Whiskey, and the best shops in Tokyo and Singapore and certainly Germany. So that is why we would like to go to those kind of places, and why we are having this conversation, really. I don't believe we will ever be a large selling whiskey brand in the EU. That's not the point. We just want to be as great as we can be. And so part of that is to be sold in those great stores and appreciated by those great whiskey fans, like all the people on this call, helping to make that list. Who makes the list of the world's great small distilleries? And it's people like us. It's writers and critics and retailers and shops and bartenders. And those are the people we want to interface with. So yes, I hope we would someday be in France. Je parle français anyway, so.
Nathan, real quick, what is your vision and what is your goal for UK with New Riff and for Germany as well?
Well, just to make it as widely distributed as we possibly can. I second what Jay's saying about, kind of getting it to people that appreciate it. So, over the next couple of years, I want to see it in a couple of national retailers, and then sort of relatively widely in bars and restaurants too. Because I think if we get it there, then more people will be able to sip and taste it rather than people having to make a commitment of buying a full bottle, which I know not everyone wants to do. But, little by little, gradually, hard work and toil working together will achieve that. So,
yeah. And always trying to get the liquid on the lips, right? So that's what we're doing here in Germany at this moment, and that's great that you're all here. All right, thank you very much. Also, Nathan there. So anytime for the...
I appreciate Expedition Whiskey's comment that we would be the Eldorado of the U.S.
Yeah, they used to be the smallest distillery in Scotland, and I like that concept as well. That was very, very good. All right, time for the last questions here. We're almost getting close to our 1 hour mark. Jay, what have you not said that you want to share with us that we should need to know here in Europe about your wonderful products and about the future? Someone also had one question, but we'll come back to that in a moment.
Right. Well, this is our core portfolio, but we also make other things. As I mentioned briefly, we make some gin. We make Kentucky Wild Gin, which is distilled using native wild foraged botanicals from Kentucky. It is not merely distilled in Kentucky, but distilled from Kentucky. It is the essences of our native region. I was inspired in this by, perhaps you know, the gin that they make at Brooklady, Botanist. And Brooklady are friends of mine and a big influence on me and on New Riff. And I was really impressed with how they went about making a gin. And being a gin freak, that is what I wanted to do. We don't have flower and gorse or mugworts or nettles or whatever the hell they're putting in their gin. Sea cucumbers and some things like that. But we do have our own native botanicals here in the Ohio Valley in Kentucky. And so we do make gin as well. But on the side of all that, we make a host of other whiskeys. And at the small risk of teasing you with things that you can't get for a while.
Exactly.
But be advised that we make many different whiskeys, many more new riffs, right? We started out, we set out to make a new riff on an old tradition. This is like a guitar riff or a jazz riff. We learned the tradition, which is sour mash whiskey making, but we are putting our riff upon it. And we have a riff like Bottled and Bond without chill filtration, but we have many more riffs coming down the pike, and they get heavier and heavier and heavier, our riffs. So in the fullness of time, some of those, I believe, will make their way overseas. So you can look forward to that in the future.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Ben asked the question. I'll just post it up here real quick again about these two different things here that were, where is he again? Oh, I missed him. So it was about the two whiskeys. One, you had one, the Balboa, is that correct? A Munster?
Balboa, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you mention the mash bill there or whatever's important about that?
Right. Here, I have a bottle of Balboa right here. Give me a second.
All right, no problem. All right. So going back to Nathan while he's going there, do you have any good questions for us or information you'd like to provide?
Oh, me?
So
yeah, Nathan, yeah.
This is another one which I'm sorry is not available to you yet. It's still only slowly making its way across America, but this is an heirloom rye. The grain bill in this is 95% rye, 5% malted rye, except the rye component is called Balboa. This is an heirloom rye. I don't know how you say that in German at all, but we have heirloom tomatoes and heirloom breeds of pigs and heirloom, in this case, heirloom grain. It's an heirloom rye, and it is grown for us by our farmer. He's been growing it on his family farm for decades in Indiana, and we're so lucky as to be able to make this into whiskey. So we've made a goodly amount of Balboa, enough, like I said, that someday it would make it to our overseas locations. And it's beautiful. I wouldn't say it's better than our normal rye, but it's absolutely different. More floral, more fruitier, and really lovely stuff. The maltster that someone may have mentioned was another example of one of our riffs, right? It was more of a one-off riff. There are riffs that we make that we repeat and we make every year. And then there are things that we do one time, and that's all. And the maltster, for the most part, was a one-time thing. Maltster was an exploration of malted grains. We have a background here as brewers. I am an old home brewer, and started brewing my own beer in 1990. And
when you were exactly 21, right?
Well, sure, if you say so. But our head distiller came to us from the brewing industry. He was a brewer, really almost a master grade brewer at Samuel Adams. So his background is not in whiskey making, but it's in beer making. So we both, and especially Brian Sprance, our head distiller, he's really got a way with malted grains. And so we set about making some various experiments, really, or specialty whiskeys, for want of a better term, that involved different malted grains. We made one with malted rye, where instead of 30% rye in the bourbon, it was a bourbon with 30% malted rye. And we made another maltster that was called wheat, and that was made with a variety of wheat and wheat malt, including floor malted Bavarian wheat, including some raw wheat, and including some chocolate wheat, and even a little bit like 7% Munich roasted wheat. So what that grain bill recalls, if you know your wheat beer styles, is a Dunkelweizen.
Yeah, exactly. See? Very good. Good German, by the way.
Yeah, sure. I can't speak German except for the beer. I'm pretty good at the beer. So one of my favorite beer styles, and Brian's also, is Hefeweizen from Bavaria. And so he made a beer, a sort of Dunkelweizen inspired bourbon, and that was Malster wheat, and that was a one-time thing. It was we sold it a year ago, so it's not on the market at all. Again, I'm sorry to tempt you, but that's what that is. If you're in America, you may find a bottle of it somewhere in a collection or something like that, or some of the bars may still have it, and it was a really cool whiskey.
All right, very good. Let's see. I think over here in Germany, we say the best whiskey makers are beer makers. If you can make a good beer, the distillation is just taking out the good elements that have been made beforehand anyways. And so we really have had that experience. Right. All right, very, very good. So this is fabulous. So 4 weeks ago, Chris says, I didn't know anything about rye. Got samples by two gorgeous super fans 2 weeks ago. Bought 2 bottles of rye, one of them being the New Riff. This might just illustrate how good New Riff is. Exactly. Very, very good. All right, Jay, thank you very much for all that you've said. Any last questions, please ask now. Also, Nathan, thank you very much for making it possible. We need someone in Britain to send us the whiskey from America, which is a unique situation that we have at the moment, but I think it's a very, very good situation. I'm very happy to be one of the people here in Germany trying to push more bourbon, push more rye, and especially in this moment here, New Riff, which is beautiful. Are you open? Could we come visit you if someone's in the States or someone makes it over there?
Yes, we are. I don't know where the pandemic will lead us, but currently we are open for tours. You can find out all about that at newriffdistilling.com. Yep. Okay. And we are on Instagram as well, hashtag New Riff, and Twitter and most of the social feeds and social media. We offer tours 5 days a week. I think right now we are closed Monday and Tuesday, and we are open Wednesday through Sunday for tours. You do have to reserve a spot on a tour. Yeah. We at this time we cannot take walk-ups, but you can reserve a spot on newriffdistilling.com. I see it right there. Thank you.
Exactly. All right, thank you. Yay, let's push more bourbon in Germany. I totally agree. All right, exactly. Thank you, Jay. All right, so that's it for our time together. The hour's up and the time's up. Now, if anyone has any questions here about anything, I forgot to mention the prizes here for the single barrels. So for the bourbon, we're at 66 euros, and for the rye, we're around 70 euros. So they're a tiny little bit more, but hey, there's also more alcohol. We have to pay more taxes and so on them.
Barrel proof.
That's barrel proof, exactly. Very, very good stuff. So Zasha says, thank you very much. He enjoyed it. Greg over in Paris says, very interesting. Thanks, Jay. Also on Nathan and for Jason, thank you very much. Rock on, says Fleur here from over there in Poland. And Greg, just subscribe to your Twitter feed. Are you active on social media? Where can we find you, Jay?
Yes, I'm personally not, but you can find New Riff at hashtag New Riff.
All right, very, very good. So I might just post this as well over here on Instagram. So there we go. So we have that also. Good. The last comments. There we go. Got it. Okay. Right. WhiskyJason here. I say thank you very much to Nathan, and thank you very much on Jay for having this time together, and all the retailers out there. If you need any more New Riff, it's on pre-order at the moment, and in the middle of September, hopefully we'll have the new pallets over here, 1,200 new bottles for Germany. And for anyone that private wants to buy one or so bottles, go to Dine Whiskey or Bio Wine or whiskey.lu, or you can contact me. A couple bottles I have left, and we can also make that happen. All right. Thank you very much. Last words, Nathan. Go to you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Jason, thank you for putting it on. And Jay, thank you so much for your contribution tonight.
My pleasure.
And for everyone that's listening, people on the chat, hope to see you all soon.
All right. And Jay, you get the last words.
Well, thank you, Germany, for enjoying New Riff. I hope to make it over there. I would like to try some Dunkelweizen myself fresh in Bavaria, and you can drink the New Riff. Thank you.
Bye. All the best.
Bye-bye.